Hey guys, Matt here from Testify Performance. Going to give you 3 ways to mobilize your lower body and your hips to maximize your skating stride and skating efficiency. So one of the first exercises we're going to go through is focused on the inner thigh, a group of muscles commonly known as the groin. We call this exercise an adductor rock back. So that's going to work to lengthen the tissue of your inner thigh. So what we're going to do, we're going to have our knee directly underneath our hip. We're going to kick our foot out as far as we can, maintaining a flat neutral back. Big toe is going to remain down, knee is locked, and we should feel a fair amount of tension through that groin and inner thigh area. From here, we are going to actively drive our butt back, and we're going to hang out in this stretch for 2 minutes. Now, when we're hanging out here, we're not just going to sit here for 2 minutes and do nothing. We want to do a couple things. We want to alternate between 10 seconds of driving our toe down into the ground, and then from there we can really actively spend another 10 seconds where we push our hips even further back, further lengthening this group of muscles. The idea between adding length to this tissue is, if you think of it this way, when we're in our stride depth and we go to stride out, if my inner thigh is very, very tight, I can only stride 3/4 of a meter, versus if my tissue is nice and lengthened and I can actively obtain a much longer stride out, we're going to be able to apply more force into the ice and therefore create more forward speed. We're going to pair this with a stability drill. So going into the same position, not quite as extreme. From here, we're going to brace, actively push our hands into the ground, and we're going to try and lift this foot off while minimizing any movement through the lower back. We'll perform 10 repetitions per side with a 3-second hold. That's just going to let your body understand that, hey, we can go into this range of motion, we can control it, and we can own it. All right, so exercise number 2 is going to be focused more on stride depth, so your ability to get low into your ankles, knees, and hips. In order to achieve a solid stride depth position, we're going to need quite a bit of range of motion in our ankles for our knees to go over our toe. Our on-ice staff talk about that chin-knee-toe alignment all the time. If we're missing range of motion in that ankle complex, we're going to have to get range from our hips, and it's going to result in more of a hip hinge posture in order to get low and have control of our center of gravity. So having mobility through that ankle and allowing our knee to work over our toe with stability is really key. First exercise, we are going to elevate our toe an inch, 1.5 inches off the ground. It doesn't really matter what it is. From this position, we're going to step into a split squat. As I lower down, I'm going to keep my chest up, actively pushing my knee directly over my toe, making sure it's not diving in. Should feel a moderate stretch on the back of the lower calf and the soleus muscle group. And from here, we're going to hang out for 2 minutes, actively driving that knee over that toe. Once we finish that, we're going to move over for a split squat where we're going to just work with a bit more tempo and challenge the strength and stability on this front leg. It's going to be a knee over toe split squat. We're going to actively drive the knee over the toe, tap the knee to the ground, maintaining an upright torso and not letting that knee dive in. And then we're going to come on out. We're aiming for a 3-second tempo down and a 3-second tempo up for 10 repetitions per side. Exercise number 3, again, focused on stride depth. Now looking at the ability for the athlete to flex their hips, which is the ability to bring that knee up toward the chest. If we're lacking hip flexion, that's going to reduce our ability to load into that kind of triple flexion position we talked about earlier, flexion of the ankle, knee, and hip. If we're missing our ability to go here, we're going to have to get range of motion from other places, or again, we're really going to hip hinge and be lacking stability on our blades. So the first exercise, more of a mobility exercise. We're going to have a band with moderate tension hooked up on the hip. We're going to let this leg straighten out, and then we can just grab onto the shin and relax. From here, we're trying to actively pull the knee or thigh as close to the chest as possible. We can work through different ranges. We can work out to the side as long as this calf and opposite knee stays on the ground. We want to avoid any pinchiness as we come in toward the midline through the hip. So avoid that pinchiness and just work into the range that you have. That'll be done for 2 minutes per side. As soon as you're done that, you want to really own that range of motion and control it. So we're going to come over to a wall. You can have a pad for your knee, but as long as your toes are dug in and this hip is neutral, so I'm really upright and strong, I can have my hands against the wall. From here, I'm going to set lots of tension through my core and my midline, and I'm going to actively pull my thigh to my chest, strengthening my psoas, my hip flexor, to create that hip flexion range. Here, what we'll do is 10 repetitions per side with a 3-second hold. All right, so those are our 3 mobility exercises to help mobilize our hips and enhance both our stride length and our stride depth. One of the most important parts when completing these exercises is to have intent. You can't just expect to aimlessly work through these exercises and achieve any sort of result. They have to be done with a high amount of intent and purpose. Number 2 would be consistent. So perform these exercises on average 2 times a day. 1 is probably a good time in the morning when you're stiff, when you wake up. And then number 2 would be as a more of a pre-practice or pre-game warm-up, just to ensure that we have adequate range of motion so that our hips feel unencumbered and free as we're skating on the ice.